Hi everyone. I hope you're having a lovely day. Before we kickstart off this symposium, I figured I would introduce ourselves. My name is Darla Kino. My main campus is Queens College, and my major is Communication Sciences and Disorders. Um, this upcoming fall, well, I'm a senior right now, and this upcoming fall, I'm going to graduate school to study speech language pathology. Oh wow.
I'm Zoe. I'm also a senior. I'm a creative writing major. I go to Brooklyn College, and I'm also going to graduate school. I'm going to Queens to study library science because I'm a children's librarian. Yeah.
So, as mentioned in the title of this class, we have read a bunch of Central Asian literature where we examine topics such as Soviet collectivization, famine in Kazakhstan, and post-colonial identity formation. Writers and scholars like Adib Khalid and Sarah Cameron challenged us to reconsider Central Asia's place within global history.
Yeah. And along with reading, we've had the pleasure of watching a series of Central Asian films. Some examples are Minbala, a Kazakh film. It's coming of age. It's a war film. I really liked it a lot. It centers around friendship, love, and jealousy. Shiso, another coming of age Kazakh film that follows a young boy as he wrestles with his mental health and societal pressures. And Baran, a love story that highlights cultural conflicts between the Iranians and Afghan people in the early 2000s. Yeah, and watching these films allowed us to learn more about Central Asian history and art and culture.
Mhm. And while we read and watched many pieces about Central Asian culture, our professor Zora has also really emphasized immersive and community learning. For example, for our midterm, we were tasked to conduct field research within the boroughs to explore how Central Asian immigrant communities are making spaces, building businesses, and supporting one another. So basically, we would either go to restaurants or make dishes at home. We were also given the option to do mapping on Central Asian neighborhoods. I know my midterm group in particular, we visited a restaurant named Uyghur Lagman House in Regal Park, Queens, where we tried out many dishes like Uyghur manta, Uyghur polo, and cold bean jelly salad. We also got some drinks like kumpa and some special tea. And we even had the chance to converse with the restaurant owner and ask him many questions. Making conversations with new people is truly one of the best ways to learn about someone's culture, which is why guest speakers are also a big part of this class.
Yeah, throughout the semester, we've had the pleasure of hearing from different guest speakers who shared their art and research with the class. Some examples are artists Ida Salofa, I believe, yes, okay, and Gerald Sheffield II, and researcher and writer Abike Amidi. We got to hear from them, just to name a few. And today we will have yet another opportunity to hear from wonderful people who will share the world of Central Asian art and film. And yeah.
So joining us today, welcome Omid Jahan, a music archivist, Marquez Rueda, a filmmaker, Ali Bulich, a filmmaker as well, and Drala Aikarin, an actress and screenwriter. My fellow classmates will now introduce them individually and in more detail throughout the symposium. I hope you guys enjoy. Yay.
Hi, Omid.
Hello, hello everyone.
Yeah, so Omid Jahan, also known as OMJ Vinyls on Instagram, is an Afghan American archivist, collector, DJ, and curator based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Born in the East Bay, his work centers on preserving and sharing the sounds and stories of Afghanistan's cassette era music culture, both from within Afghanistan and across its diaspora. Founded the Afghan Cassette Archive, an ongoing project dedicated to digitizing and documenting rare recordings from radio, television, and diaspora cassette scenes. Through listening sessions, DJ sets, and public programs, he brings these archival sounds to new audiences across cities including Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and Munich. His work has been featured by the BBC and New Lines magazine, and he has collaborated with libraries, cultural institutions, and artists internationally. In addition to his archival work, Omid runs Analog Afghan, a label focused on cassette and vinyl releases that reissue historic recordings while supporting contemporary interpretations of Afghan sound.
Definitely, I mean, you did a very good job. Thanks again. As I'm assuming everyone already knows, my name's Omid. I go by the username OMJ Vinyls online, but yeah, I consider myself an amateur archivist, I guess a DJ. I do many things, but yeah, we could get started with the questions. That was a really good introduction. I have nothing to add, honestly.
Very cool. So our first question is, how was working on the Afghan Cassette Archive change your connection to your Afghan identity?
No, that's a very good question, and it's a question I could talk on and on about, and even tomorrow I'll be talking about it in LA. But for me, growing up in the States, you try to like figure out who you are, But then when you come from, when your ancestors come from a land that isn't the US, you try to figure out, and you're especially first generation, you're trying to figure out who you are. And I felt like that's been myself my whole life. And even now I feel like I'm still trying to figure out who I am. But with this cassette archive and, collecting like these sort of cassettes, it's been allowing me to figure out, what my parents left behind and what the culture was before they left their homeland, and it helps me connect to my roots because I feel like music is the key of getting into culture. Because when people ask, okay, let's get into my culture, and when people look at their ancestry, they like to look at not only the language and the food, but the music, And I feel like for Afghan people, it's music, and that's I would say one of the biggest things that has been given to the world in the past 100 years now is music from Afghanistan, and I feel like a lot of it has been forgotten, and that's why I try my best to get as many of these as possible. Either I'll smuggle them, I'll buy them from people in the border regions, and then I'll get them shipped here. And if we get this grant from UCLA, inshallah, then it would be easier to go over there and then digitize things. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. It goes into my next question, and I'm kind of curious now about maybe what is one thing that you learned about your culture and your parents' culture, before they left through the cassettes that, like, I guess stands out to you.
That's a very good question. And I wish I had the cassette here. I packed up a lot of my cassettes because I'm taking them, but in the 70s, I did find some of these duet cassettes where there was like, it looked like, I had to ask my friends about it because they're musicians. There was like, a female and there was like, a young boy. And I asked my friends, why is it that they paired them up? In Afghanistan and some of the like really conservative regions, when they had parties, they usually wanted music in the female side, but the males couldn't go on that side. So they used to train these little boys to sing, and they would go with the female singer, and used to sing as a duet. And I thought that was very interesting because usually you never see a pairing like that. And I don't know if that really still occurs in Afghanistan, but it was nice to see that there was this sort of history not occurring only in like one region of the country, but in the whole region. It's nice to have this documented because I find cassettes from Kandahar that have this, cassettes from the north that have this, cassettes from the east, the west, and even from the center.
Oh, thank you. I think my next question is, what is the most difficult part of running an archive that is volunteer-based and is curated by folks all around the world?
Yeah, time zone. I'd say it's time zone because everyone lives in a time zone. Like some people will live in Afghanistan or Pakistan, some people will live in Germany. Sometimes, it's hard to like meet up, but luckily the people who volunteer to help out always have the time and the means to do it. Another difficulty is always income because to get these things, it's a lot of money. So I'm grateful that I have a day job that pays decently well. And of course, I live at home. If I didn't live at home, this wouldn't have happened. But in 2 to 3 years, I'll most likely, buy a property and hopefully, live in it. So if that happens, I don't know if I'd still be able to get as many cassettes as possible, but I hope to continue the journey, but we'll see.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how you got the archive started? Like, when did the idea to actually form a maybe official archive began, and then how did you get more people involved as like time went on?
I'd say for me, and I I feel like it's luck and like destiny meeting at the same time. Because I used to I still collect vinyl records. I've collected vinyl records since I was 14 years old. Like I used to go to thrift stores because, a lot of, brown moms like to go to thrift stores. And as a kid, I didn't like going there. So I used to go to the record section and just pull out records and start, buying whatever records I can. But with these cassettes, I started buying cassettes maybe like 3, 4 years ago. It was a small, modest collection. But through Instagram, I was able to like meet all these people that have these collections and chat with them, and then also like make connections where we were able to connect with people even in the homeland and like, get things. Granted, I mean, if you watch the BBC documentary, what sucks is you need a VPN for that. We did have to get a smuggler to go into the country to get the cassettes. But yeah, so for running the archive, I'd say it's been a year now since the archive has formally been formed. And I didn't get really into doing the work on the website because I did buy the domain, but I didn't like invest into, doing the work till 5, 6 months ago. And since then, it's been thriving well. We've been getting users from Afghanistan, a lot of users from Germany, sometimes Japan, a lot of random countries. But it's really nice to see that there's like a connection within the whole diaspora. And we hope that this connection continues through this archive.
Okay, yeah. I think my next question I want to ask you is that music is also something that's like very much a kind of community builder. And so I was wondering just through like finding these different cassette tapes, have you heard any stories from people about like what did they experience when they first heard the song drop or anything like that? Or what was like the music scene in Afghanistan like?
From the older generation or from
Yeah,
like people?
from
Yeah,
like
I
the older,
actually, I'll repeat that.
from like the older generation.
Yeah. I actually had a session recently where there was this uncle, we call him Kaka. There was this Kaka, he was a really nice guy, and I started playing some of these songs. Like there was a Nashnas song I played. It looks like this is Nashnas. I played one of the like I call it like a psychedelic tune because the whole cassette is a bunch of electric guitar instead of like having, the traditional instruments. They were trying to do what they call a fusion sound. And when I played that, he told me a story about how when he used to listen to these cassettes, no matter what track I played, whether it was Ahmad Zahir or Bangicha or something, he says it reminds him of driving around Afghanistan, driving into like the cities and then hearing it through the loudspeakers. And it brought back like happy memories for him. So whenever I play for the older generation, they always reminisce about how they would like be in the country in like the exact moment where they were when they heard the song. Like when I played that exact Nashna song, he remembered where he was exactly. He remembered he's at the center of Kandahar when he was traveling with his family. And it's really cool to hear these stories sometimes, especially from the older generation, because sometimes it's harder to connect with them, I feel. And from my experience, and sometimes music helps, but sometimes it doesn't. So it's nice to see when they're able to connect and you can like see that look of amazement and like reminiscence.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really cool to hear. I was wondering, would it be possible for you to like share like a song or a cassette with us in this moment? So I think music is best understood as you know by like actually listening to it. And so if that's possible, I think that'd be really cool for us to hear.
Yeah, I sent it on the chat if it works.
Thank you for sharing that. I really loved it. I love the drums of it especially, and I think I love how like lively it sounds. Like I've never been to like an Afghan house party, but I could imagine hearing that. And like my family's Haitian, and so I think the story you had also shared about how like the uncle like started remembering like his youth. I think that just like reminds me of just like how often in like Haitian parties, Caribbean parties, any like immigrant parties, I feel like once the music comes on and it's like an oldie, like everybody gets up and like they kind of like come alive in a different way. And so thank you so much for like sharing the song and also sharing that story.
No problem. I mean, I wish I could have shared this cassette 'cause this is really cool, like funky track in here, but uh I mean, I would have to download it. It's a big WAV file, then I would have to cut it and then send it. So apologies if I didn't do that. I mean, one day y'all will hear what's in this cassette. It's a really cool track. It reminds me of like Ethiopian rock, like Ethiopian psychedelic music, and it's like in Afghan, in Dari or Farsi, which is really cool.
I have more questions, but I don't want to like hold you up too much. So I also wanted to like open it up to everybody else to see if anybody has like a question they want to ask.
My question was about like the oral histories that you've kind of picked up along the way. Like, you're talking about all these like conversations you've had with elders. Like, I think like something that like a lot of people in the diaspora miss out on are these conversations with elders. And I was wondering if like you would ever think about like working on a project where you kind of record some of these histories as well. Would that be of interest for you?
You
Yeah,
know,
that's my question.
I've thought about that for years now because there's a lot of diasporas that do that, and I feel like the Afghan diaspora hasn't done that. And especially like when you look at music history, that's not being done, sadly. And because of that, you just lose a lot of this information. So it'd be cool if one day we could have a project where we could do that. I'd be interested in that, helping out with a project like that. And I could think of some other people that'd be down to help too. Because it's important to have these oral histories down because none of this is written down. And once the person passes away, like Khudabeb actually, like when my BB John passed away, once they pass away, whatever stories they have that you didn't hear, they're not there anymore. And it's, sad because there's a history that was there. And I feel like, and I talk about this with my musician friends sometimes, like our parents went through a lot. It's like they had multiple lives in different countries because they've traveled all the time. So it's kind of sad that, we're not documenting it and we should document it. And I'd be really interested in a project like that if it ever occurs.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool too, because I think going back to what you're saying, like so many people have been disconnected from these histories too. And so it would be like a rich project for people to like get connected, but also like the music really like is important because of the way people have experienced it, like you were saying, like and how we experience it now. So that's something that I would be really interested in. And I know multiple people would be too. But thank you for all the work you're doing. I know like everyone's really excited about all the work. So thanks for sharing.
Well,
Thanks, guys.
I have to thank you guys for listening. If you guys, I mean, I'd still do it if you guys weren't listening, but it's just nice to see that, the community is getting really involved because even some of the portions of this archive is from the parts of the community. Like people would give me their tapes instead of selling them, which is nice. So that's what's helping this archive, keeps on going. My bad. I'm just like running off 5 hours of sleep and I have to like travel in like a couple of minutes. I mean, I still have to finish packing up and stuff, but yeah, I feel like that's my life at this point. It's like I go from one place to another place to another place. So that's what it's like.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you guys so much and apologies if I talk too little or too much.
No worries. You talk perfectly. Safe travels.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Khudafiz.
Thank you.
So does everyone, this is Maquise. Maquise is a London-based writer, director, and producer. Maquise has built a distinguished career creating films that explore identity, memory, displacement, and the human experience with both emotional depth and cinematic artistry. She began filmmaking at a young age through the National Film and Television School's prestigious Summer Docs program. Her documentary work includes, sorry. Her documentary work includes Young Afghans, which follows university students navigating life and ambition in Kabul, and the award-winning Only Voice Remains. She also directed notable films such as Fat Girl, a fiction short that has been recognized at numerous international film festivals. Alongside her independent filmmaking, McKees has produced documentaries and visual content for organizations and broadcasters including Al Jazeera English, BBC, Sky News, and Adobe. So we also have ready the movie Sound of Birds, and we also prepared questions.
and I'd like to begin with a few questions on the film we just saw, The Sound of Birds. And as we just saw, the movie follows an Afghan woman preparing for her henna night while at the same time witnessing devastating events unfolding in Afghanistan through the news. Often, the Afghan diaspora find themselves living between two worlds, navigating a balance between joy and grief, which was powerfully reflected in your film. Was that something you personally experienced, and where did you find the inspiration for the storyline?
Yeah, firstly, hi everyone. Thank you for this class. It's really lovely what you're doing. So yeah, in terms of this film, it came from I was actually getting married, and it was the same. It's kind of an experience a lot of us diaspora, whether you're Afghan or Haitian or whatever, like you have that pull towards a home. I know Omi John, I think he was like a first generation Afghan born in America, but I was born in Afghanistan and I came to the UK when I was 7. So I definitely have memories of like in the mountains of Afghanistan and like, in Kabul, and I have like a very strong sense of Afghan identity from growing up there. And so for me, I think you get like different types of diaspora identities, like in the sense that like some people want to assimilate and fit into like their new kind of Britishness or in your case Americanness. But like for me, I always felt very strongly like we're Afghan, and my parents were very much like we're Afghan, and so I always felt that sense of, and I think a lot of us have that sense of pull, especially when your country is like a country like Afghanistan where it's not stable and it is quite, it's obviously having gone through like 40 years of war, and there's obviously a dire situation in terms of women's rights and the economy and poverty, etc. So it's not one of those countries. I was like thinking about this. I was like, if I was like from Switzerland, I wouldn't even care. Do you know what I mean? I could easily get married and live a life in England and it wouldn't affect me. But I was basically getting married and about to settle into this new life. I mean, I've always lived in London, but it just kind of felt like a cementing move. And so you feel that sense of, will I ever go home? Will I ever go back to Afghanistan? Which is, I think, a dream every refugee and every migrant kind of holds, whether it ever comes true or not. And so this film was kind of just giving a little bit of voice to that. And yeah, so it literally came from the chaos of, and it actually came from like a memory of like, at my wedding day, it was chaotic thanks to my mum. And but also I remember just taking moments of just like calm and just seeing these crazy birds flying everywhere. And so I think that's the inspiration for the film. But yeah, it's like obviously it's a exploration of identity essentially.
It's amazing, yeah, and I could definitely relate to that connection to home. I was also born in Afghanistan. Um, Another question I had was about a topic we discussed in class, which was on the issue of consent when it comes to Afghan women being portrayed in the media, where family considerations can sometimes play a role. How do you navigate consent in your filmmaking, and do you find it challenging to find Afghan actors due to these cultural considerations?
Yeah, I mean that was a real struggle because obviously I'm Afghan and my mum's Afghan. So my mum is in that film. She's the one in the red dress. She's the mother. So I got one Afghan woman in there. And then also we really wanted to find good Afghan actresses who'd be willing to be on screen. But as we all know, like there's a lot of like, well, firstly, there's not really a high regard for cinema. I think that is changing, but I think, there is that sense of we don't want women on screen. Well, again, it's hard to generalize, but there is like this issue a lot of Afghan filmmakers find. I have a friend called Elham who did a film called Yellow, and he also had an issue casting an Afghan actress, and he ended up with an Iranian, and I've ended up with an actress who's kind of the main lead actress. She's not Afghan. So what I tried to do was build around that by having obviously as many Afghan and kind of Persian women in there. So I have my mom, I have Nargis, who's Afghan, she's Afghan, and then I have Melanie, the other girl, she's Iranian. So trying to embed as many kind of people from that region as possible. But it is a struggle, and I think I hope that changes. But obviously we have a lot of um, kind of complex relationships of women on screen and women being allowed to kind of do these roles which are deemed kind of unhonorable in some cultures. I think obviously I think new generations will change that, but yeah, that is an issue that you encounter. Yeah.
Thank
In
you.
terms of consent, I don't know if I answered your question about consent. Like, did I answer that?
No, that was good. That
Okay.
was good. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. So another topic we also discussed in class was how the media usually portrays Central Asian communities as reduced to victims. And there's this ongoing effort to reclaim those narratives. And a lot of the media shows Afghan women and focuses mainly on their struggles. How do you balance raising awareness on those important realities while also highlighting the resilience, achievements, and individuality of Afghan women?
So I have a personal story related to this, which is young Afghans. So I work like I obviously make films, and that's kind of where I'm kind of transitioning to. But I come from a background in journalism, so I started out in like 24-hour news at the height of the Arab Spring and the height of Afghan conflict. And so I've navigated like France 24, BBC, etc., Al Jazeera, and throughout those times working as a news producer and a journalist, the main issue I had is this constant portrayal of Afghan women as like constant like victims, subjugated, poor women, and the men are so evil. And it's this really like two-dimensional narrative, which also is linked to the war on terror. And there's obviously a subtext which serves a colonial purpose. And so I was always very anti that. And so when my brother and I were 23, we went to Afghanistan, and we literally, I left my job at France 24. I went to Afghanistan. I made a film over there for 2 years called Young Afghans, over 2 years. And we deliberately wanted to show Afghans from like an Afghan perspective, because at the time all I was seeing was like subjugated woman, subjugated man, poor, 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 and it was really like annoying to me. And so I wanted to focus on a story which I thought was relevant, which is like young people in Afghanistan, which make up 65% of the population. And for me, I grew up with images of my mum and my dad at Kabul University with their cool Western outfits, and they're all mingling, and it's all, we all have that image that we see all the time. And so we went to Afghanistan, we went to Kabul Uni, and we met so many incredible women. And the central character of that is a girl called Fazana. And Fazana was like a Hazara girl. She grew up in Iran, but she was the most patriotic, strongest, most cool woman ever. And she had so many challenges because she wasn't wealthy, but she was so determined to do something good for the country, but also her religion was her source of strength, not her source of oppression. And that's something we really made sure to embed in the film. And when we were working with like a British production company, they kept saying like, oh, but isn't she downtrodden? And oh, maybe we could focus on this kid who's pulling a cart. And they just weren't interested in that image of strength and kind of self-governance and self kind of rising up for this generation. And so that film actually died because of the Arab Spring. Like when we came back, the Arab Spring happened, and Al Jazeera were no longer interested in that story. So it kind of fell off. And then now it's finding a new audience because we captured a generation who sadly are now all exiles. But yeah, I think it's a responsibility for all of us. And I think that's why this class is so important. And people like you are so important, Zora John, because it's up to us to uphold it. Like I think we have to stop relying on Western approvals and Western canons to uphold us and tell us what's right and what's wrong. I think it's up to us to say, this is our art, these are our people, this is our culture, this is dimensionality, these are the groups that exist, and this is our experience.
Yeah, I mean that it's really important to highlight those voices, and I feel like I rarely see a documentary like Young Afghans. Do you see yourself maybe continuing this documentary or revisiting these stories? And how do you think like the attitude has changed for Afghan youth post-Taliban?
I think it's really complicated right now. I think we've kind of regressed back to literally the 2003 narratives. I mean, I have friends who are trying to tell Afghan stories, and they often have to revert to the tropes. Again, I mentioned Yellow, that film my friend did. Like, personally, like that's a film I felt very much played into a very Western-friendly narrative of subjugated women. For me personally, that's why I'm not in documentary anymore, and that's why I've moved towards fiction, because for me, with Afghanistan, I don't want to feed those narratives. So I won't make a film about Afghanistan until we can do it in our own terms. And I think that comes from, again, like us collectively supporting Afghan film, Afghan filmmakers, and showing love to those projects. And also, I'll be honest, kind of financially working together to support, like to build those projects up and those communities. And I think we're kind of starting like this stuff like this is like what's part of it. And so social media and diaspora groups and all that stuff. But I think it's something that's possible, but again, it's down to us.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. What projects are you currently working on or hoping to do in the future?
Oh, I mean, at the moment, I'm doing something completely different. I'm doing like a dystopian sci-fi feature set in like 2040 involving like enforced euthanasia. So it's completely the other side of things. But again, it's kind of like part of that project of getting a little bit of commercial kind of support and success, and then using that to segue into do something I actually can do in Afghanistan properly, and which would be true to our experiences. There was a film, just so you guys know, there's a film that just opened Berlinale called No Good Men. and she's a really famous filmmaker called Sharbanu Sadat, and she did like The Wolf. I mean, I think Zora John can tell you, but she's done like a various films, and she's an amazing filmmaker. And even she, making that film, was working with German producers, and they kept saying like, "Oh, well, women, like, aren't the women oppressed?" And she was like, "No, women, Afghan women, like all women, have relationships. They fall in love. You know what I mean?" And so I think it is possible now. I think you just have to be patient, and I'm just not there yet.
Very cool. That was mainly the questions I have. If anyone wants to ask any questions, I'll open the floor to the class.
I wanted to talk about your decision in your film to not have any dialogue. What was the inspiration behind that choice?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest. I was actually at the time I was just more into like art housey kind of more. I just feel like sometimes you don't need dialogue. I think sometimes the visuals and the symbolism is enough. But actually, that was a few years ago, and now I was telling like you guys, I actually did a re-edit to put that birdshot back in to just make it really obvious. And so actually, I think if I made the film now, and maybe I would have had some dialogue. At the time, I just didn't think it was needed. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that's like a complex answer, but yeah.
I'm a Kurdish woman, by the way, so I'm your Afghani woman's strength. So in your film, again, no dialogue, I think makes it very strong because there's spears that it's only for women, and we see intervention of men behind them. Cinematography was amazing. That there is invasion and arm struggles going on, and couldn't raise their spears, and they feel this, distracted and nervous about what is happening, but it's not touching them, but it's their life. So what's happening there? Because I found it striking that you made male militaristic presence not directly in the room, but through television and multiple television. So I can see where your background is, playing role there as well. Yeah, what is happening there? Can you tell us about what were inspiration to have that? Because women are dressing this beautiful Afghani traditional, very bright colors and shiny, and all the joyous is there. And then we see, multiple televisions in this dusty roads and, just gray and, whatever brown colors. Can you tell us a bit about it, please?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's just because like a lot of us in the diaspora, whether you're again Haitian or whatever, like or Afghan, a lot of us like we form those connections through media. I mean, I work in 24-hour. Well, at the time I was working 24-hour news, and I was constantly processing images of violence and stories of war and subjugation and poverty and death. And so and that's what the film is. At the core of the film is a guilt, which I think a lot of us feel when we are here and we have our safe lives and our beauty and we have our cultural traditions. And I go to my mom's every Sunday, and she cooks these incredible Afghan meals, and we all eat it, and we're so grateful, and we get to listen to the music, and we get to have the culture and the beautiful clothes. But there's also this sense of guilt of like in Afghanistan, like they are facing violence, they are facing poverty, and they are facing whatever like your political spectrum is. Like the situation there is we are one of the poorest countries in the world, and we have gone through 40 years of war, and that war is because of as a result of the geopolitical context we reside in, as well as what other factors. But so it's that the reason for that is we often engage through that pain and that guilt and that connection through what we see through our phones and through our TVs and through our news channels. And so it's that sense of, I kind of said earlier, if I was from Switzerland, would I feel guilty? Would I even care? Would I just happily live in England and kind of continue my life here without anything? Probably. But because I'm from Afghanistan, there's a sense of responsibility, which I think we all have. And same for you, probably being Kurdish. You know what I mean? It's a sense of you carry the legacy. And what kind of, I mean, Joan was saying about oral history and legacy and our parents' memories, and a lot of that stuff isn't recorded, it isn't upheld by us in the way that we are starting to, but you know what I mean? And so it's that sense of, will it vanish? Will the country just be forgotten? Will our histories be forgotten? Will our memory, will this pain be for nothing? You know, will our new generation, I mean, I've just had a daughter, and you know, will she feel the connect, and she's a first generation living in London, like growing up in the UK. And so will she ever feel the connection that I feel, you know? So it's that sense of guilt. And I think often there's that distance between where we are and where they are, and how do we broach that distance and how do we engage with it? And often it's through screens. And yeah, so that's kind of where that scene came from. And also, I guess my background in 24 Hour News, where I was like staring at screens of violence all the time.
Thanks so much. That was incredible to hear how you use that space. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
And very relevant since the Buddhas are in New York now. The Avalon Buddha. The
Are they in
Buddha,
New York?
yes, they're on. Well, there's a replica in the West Side Highway or that park. No, I don't know. The big park that overlooks.
Amazing. You guys have to go. Send me pictures.
Highline. Sorry, it's the Highline Park. So it's very timely to see that bombing of the Buddhas of Bumyan and then seeing the faceless Buddha now. So thank you.
It's funny, to us it's so famous, but to a lot of people they don't know about the Buddhas. And I'm like, the Buddhas is like such a painful moment in so many of our generation. Like anyone in their like 30s plus, like that was the moment like we all felt that desecration of our culture. And yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
it's there in New York. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that marker of time. Thank you, Makis John.
Thank you, Missy.
Thank you guys. You guys are great. Keep going. And yeah, honestly, thank you for doing this. It's amazing.
Thanks for joining us today and sharing your work and experiences with us through film Young Afghans, The Sound of the Birds. Your storytelling challenges simplified narratives and allows audiences like us to see the complexity and resilience in Afghan communities. So thank you again.
Oh, you guys are so lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Drala
Okay.
is an Uyghur-born Chinese actress and writer based in Los Angeles, California. She's fluent in Mandarin, English, and Uyghur. She began her acting career in Beijing at the age of 19 after realizing performance was one of those things in life that she could not do without being unhappy. Although she grew up drawn to the arts, acting became her passion, and she found that she felt herself most alive and exhilarated when she was on stage, portraying a character. She later earned an MFA at the American Repertory Theater at Harvard, performed in Boston and New York, and moved to LA to pursue film and television, continuing her training with Leslie Kahn. Her film credits include My Mother Thinks I Suck, I Do, Kirthera, and most recently, Mrs. Gu and Her Armchair. So that was just everything that I've found online about you, but we'll start the conversation off by maybe you can introduce yourself, and also because our class has been focused on Central Asian studies, film and literature, I want to maybe you can begin with your Uyghur background and how has that part of your identity influenced the stories that you are drawn to as an actress and your life in general.
Yeah, so that was a great introduction. Thank you. I'm Uyghur. I was born and raised in Xinjiang, and I went to Han Chinese school, so I speak Mandarin. As far as the Western world is concerned, I'm very much Chinese. So when I started my career as an actor, I was really, my Uyghur identity was very much hidden, and it wasn't because I was hiding it. But what ends up happening is because I look very much Chinese and I speak Chinese culturally, I can be, I can pass as Chinese. Those were the roles that I was really getting. My struggle was very much the struggle of any Asian American, like Chinese American actress in America and Hollywood. I was combating stereotypes that Han Chinese people are combating in America. So for the longest time, and it wasn't because I wanted to hide my Uyghur identity, even though later I found out that my friends thought that I was, because when I first told them I'm Uyghur, nobody knew what that was. So people just kind of forgot about it. They're like, we thought you were Chinese this whole time. I'm so sorry, you thought you had to hide that you're Uyghur. I'm like, I'm not hiding. You just don't remember that I said it. Um, so and then gradually, I think the shift came when I started to make the transition from being an actor to being a writer. Once I had, agency, and I could decide what kind of stories that I got to tell, slowly I felt like I didn't have to just, portray. I'm so sorry. This just keeps.
No, you're good.
I didn't have to just like portray myself. Like I didn't have to just pretend to be Chinese anymore, that I could allow myself to tell a more complex story, a truer story that is about me. So now I am very much, I think it is really difficult to separate my art from my identity of being Uyghur and Central Asian. And it's definitely still a journey that I am on. Like, what does it mean to be a Uyghur artist, like here in Hollywood, when, this identity is still very much like unknown, and it just feels like when I am creating something or like a Uyghur story, like there's a lot of education that needs to be done, and it is very like tiring, exhausting. You're like, I have to explain like who I am all over again. But I do think that's work that needs to be done. And of course, that touches on, like who am I like telling these stories to? And that's also like sometimes like frustrating, because you're working in Hollywood, you're trying to tell these stories to the audience here, and those are not the people who, I don't know, like they don't really know who you are, and they may not care. So you want to tell those stories to, your own people, but how do you reach that audience? So yeah, so that's, I don't know if that answered your question. Let me just.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, Joel, I had another question. You mentioned being typecasted. So what kind of characters were you typically drawn to for
Yeah.
auditions, and how do you go about writing characters that feel authentic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So especially in the beginning of my career, I mean, even now, being an actor, you do not choose what like auditions that you get to go on. You have to take whatever comes your way. And because of how I looked and how Hollywood is, I was only getting these like Chinese American rules, or just Chinese rules, that didn't feel very true to myself. But I do see a slight shift I have been getting more roles that are like more open, like the character's ethnicity is not that essential. Like basically you could essentially come into the character as yourself. Like if I were to be cast, like I would just be me, like a weaker person living in America. I do welcome that shift. I would also say that being an actor, the job is very much, you're being very generous with your body and your artistry. You're basically being a vessel for other people's stories. So you're not really, if you really want to be like, oh, I'm going to choose what kind of parts that I want to play, like I would suspect that you actually don't, you're not someone for whom like acting can be like satisfying enough on its own. Like you also do want to tell your own stories, and you might want to do other things as well, because if you're an actor, like playing a good part in and of itself should be enough, but it just like never was like quite enough for me. And I don't know if that's because I never got to like tell stories that were like that were like about me, that were truthful to me, or was it because I just like wanted to do more as a storyteller. But yeah, so I'm still very much like I still have to take whatever comes my way, and it ranges from salon nail tech woman who needs to be rescued by white agents to dragon ladies and nerd best friends. Like I still have to do all of those things. And when I do those, I just have to like remember that I need to like that needs to be satisfying in its own way. Like it has to just be about acting, and I'm not, I'm just a vessel right now to tell somebody else's story. I'm not necessarily like bringing all of me into the character.
Mhm. And can you tell us a little bit about your writing process?
hmm my writing process, I'm a very structured writer. I
Mhm.
definitely start off, I can't just like go into like a long like first draft where I'm just like, musing about things. I know people who write that way, but I very much need to figure out what are my themes? What is it that at the heart of this, what is my question? What is my big question that I want to ask? That I don't have an answer to. And that is very, very important to me. Until I find that thing, it is very difficult for me to start writing. Um, but yeah, is that what you're asking, or
Yeah.
more detailed?
I can't jump
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
So you said you like when you write, you ask a certain question. Can you give us
Mhm.
examples of like what is something you might ask yourself, or what is like a story that you might want to tell?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, um, so I have um, written this TV pilot that is set in, you know, 18th century China. It's about these women who are called the Combe sisters, and basically what they do is they are women who have sworn to never marry and instead work for a living. And this is society's way of being like, okay, we don't know what a working woman is, so we're gonna say that you can work, but you just have to never marry. You have to be a virgin your whole life. So that seems very removed from my circumstance. But the question that I have in my life is very much like, as a woman in like, today's society, it's still a very much patriarchal society. Can you really love a man and be a feminist at the same time? Like, is that possible? Like, can you be in a relationship with a man and still claim like fully like be honest and like truthful to your like feminist self? Is that possible? So in the story, there's a girl who really wants to become sister because she wants to work for the rest of her life. She wants to be an independent woman, but then she falls in love with a guy, and that's that's the story. So the question in the heart of that is something that I really don't have a like a true answer to, like navigating my personal relationships, because I do love like my partner, but at the same time, we both, are products of our societies, are like the norms, and in our everyday life, we are combating a lot of the, patriarchy. So yeah, so that's an example of how I ask a question in my real life that exists in my real life through work that is very removed from me.
Mhm. Charlotte, I had a question. What would you say is one of your most memorable moments behind the scenes on set for you?
Um, yeah, so I think behind the scenes,
Mhm.
for me is when I wrote and directed my own short film. I kind of did it before I was really ready to like write or act or direct. But the whole experience taught me that you can be in charge of your voice, your story. You literally can just tell people like to show up for you, and people will, and you will get to like be in charge of how you tell the story. And it was very empowering. Um, and I think that lesson was like the biggest lesson that I got like through, I think, the whole of my career, is that you do have a voice, and um, you just have to, go out and do it. And that was also a very pivotal moment for me personally, because I, I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know if I could, if I should. But that was like a project that showed me, like, sure, like, go for it, like, it's fine. Yeah.
I'm wondering, so like I want you to talk a little bit about your Uyghur identity, and the way. So like personally, I haven't seen much portrayal of it in cinema.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering a multi-pronged question. One, how is it usually portrayed
Mm.
in media, whether it be Western media or Eastern media? Um, and at the same time, what are kind of those stereotypes that possibly or harmful
Mm.
portrayals about Uyghur identities that are present in media? Um, and then let's start with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a
Let's start with that.
question.
Good question. I haven't seen really a lot of Uyghur stories or identity portrayed in Western media at all. I think there's, Preparation for the Next Life, and I think there is another movie coming out soon. But I think there's just like, it's the vacuum, like there's nothing there. But in China, there is, of course, like a lot of like Uyghur, a lot of films that are that has like Uyghur characters in it, or other minorities from, I call minorities, that's the Chinese term for it, minorities in Xinjiang that are like Kazakhs and Uzbeks that are centered in these like films in China, and it's very very, I suspect it's very similar to Soviet films about Central Asians, because in the beginning, literally like. China was basically copying everything the Soviet Union was doing, in relation to the Central Asian ethnic groups. So it's very similar. There's a lot of poor Uyghur girl has to endure so much, and then liberation came, and then Communist Party saved her entire family and village, but she also still died. It's so sad. A lot of like stories like that. And then I think more recently, I think there is this like other trope that has emerged, it's kind of like the noble savage, the wise Indian kind of like trope. So Xinjiang is usually at the end of the film, it's where like the lost protagonist goes to find themselves among these like primitive but wise and mysterious people. I think the TV show that really encapsulates this is called My Altai. I think it has a different name in Chinese, in English, but it's basically about this like, Chinese mother and daughter who tries to like find themselves in Altai region with these like Kazakh, you know, living amongst these Kazakh people, and like, yeah, it is very, to me, it is very like strange and like just like, frustrating to see that. And but in China, it was a huge hit and people really, really loved it. And I think there's this thing where you don't get a lot of representation. So when you do get some representation, you're just like so grateful and happy to see yourself in it that you forget that like you don't mind that it's not a very good like portrayal of you, or authentic portrayal of you. You're not really asking for that anymore. So yeah, I think we still have a lot of work to do to combat those stereotypes, and it's not really about stereotypes. I think it really is about like, can you like are you able to authentically tell, you know, Central Asian stories? And there are so many obstacles to it, but I think, as artists, like as Central Asian artists, it is like our duty to like at least try to do that. So that's kind of like what I like want to do, and not really just like representation, but really just to like make sure that I get to like tell my stories authentically. And I think that's all, an artist can do. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I think what you were saying about like the parallelism between what was happening with like Central Asian countries and Soviet film and with China. So I'm wondering like we in class we were learning that a lot of like Central Asian film was being sponsored by Moscow and the Soviet Union. and because of that, they controlled what was, the narrative. But now there's like a shift where there's more private, like not private funding, but what would you say, like self funding and self. So I'm wondering if movies right now are being produced by Uyghur people, is it mostly people who are still in the region, or is it people like yourself who are, in America now or in, Europe or yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think the situation in China is a little bit different. I think it's still very much centralized. Like you only get to make what is sanctioned and allowed and permitted, and that is it's just a very limited portrayal of the Uyghur experience. And I think if people are trying to make, authentic Uyghur stories, it is really quite hard. It's kind of impossible in China, I would think. I think it's mostly diaspora that is trying to do that work, and it is, even harder in the diaspora because even, nobody knows who you are and like who are you? You're Chinese. Yeah, so there's really, I think, at the moment, like a vacuum.
Okay.
There isn't like much going on. Yeah.
Mhm. And I saw that you recently starred in a film called Preparation for the Next Life.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that film, your
Yeah.
work on the film, and yeah.
Yeah. I really have a very, very small part in it. You blink and, you miss it. Like I'm the mother in the flashback, so you
Mhm.
barely can see me. The most valuable thing that came out of that film for me was that I get to meet the other two Uyghur actors and filmmakers who work on the film, and we've, since formed this like lifelong like friendship, and that's the most valuable thing to me because as a Uyghur artist, you really don't see a lot of us like in the wild, like you don't encounter other Uyghur artists that often, filmmakers especially. So that was very valuable, and I think the film itself, I I think people did incredible work on it, and I think that um, everyone came to the film with the best of intentions, but it also was like a lesson in like kind of what not to do when it's, about like a Uyghur like film.
How so?
Yeah, so I
If
think
you're comfortable sharing.
yeah, so I think first of all, in the creative process, I don't think a Uyghur person was like really involved. Like this for a film that like, has like a Uyghur protagonist, like there was like no um the writer wasn't, the director wasn't, like no one was, and the director was actually Chinese American, which was why he was picked, which is to me just so like wrong. Like it's a deep misunderstanding of who should be telling like these stories. Um, and I understand why, that happened and the calculations behind that. But at the same time, I think what happens is that you have people who really do not understand this experience, and you kind of like just put on this label of Uyghur on this girl for like no real good reason. So can you call it a Uyghur film or not? Like I'm not like 100% certain. Like I think when um, no one is involved in the creative process, except for the actors, of course. It is, yeah, yes, I said that's why I didn't screen the film. Like, it's not really a Wheeler film. I wouldn't say like I don't think it qualifies.
Okay.
But it's a good start, is what I guess I could say.
Yes.
But yeah,
No, I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that with us, and
yeah,
the experiences, the good and the bad.
yeah.
Um, I think kind of to close out, why don't you tell us a little bit about current projects that you're working on, or future projects, something you'd love to work on, or currently working on?
Yeah. So I'm currently writing on two projects that I'm developing, two TV series. I think I sent you guys little excerpts of like the pilots that I'm writing. One is about a Chinese woman. Again, I'm writing about a Chinese woman because that is a culture that I understand, and that's the culture that Hollywood understands. But it's about a Chinese woman who has to go farm with this Iowan, family on an Iowan farm. The family's super conservative, and she is an outsider. And in the face of this Chinese American geopolitical situation, I find that very interesting that she has to kind of like navigate this world. And then another project is about a Uyghur choreographer who lands a big job at this prestigious ballet company. And she sets out to revolutionize ballet, decolonize ballet. But she soon realizes that the institution and the world of ballet is very allergic to change. So she's trying to enact change where it seems impossible. So those are the two projects that I'm writing on. I'm also working on a feature. And I think I have slowly transitioned. Like my focus really is very much on writing nowadays. So yeah.
I do have one more question, if that's fine.
Yeah.
How do you, take feedback or criticism or critiques as a writer compared to when you're acting? How is that different?
Yeah, it both feels very personal. I think I think as an actor, you just feel like you're saying no to me as a person. When somebody tells you that you're not right for this role, you should do something different. It's really like quite like a terrible rejection that you feel, your whole body feels. So maybe because of that, like I was like very well prepared for, I feel like now, like when my writings get like critiqued, I feel like fine. I'm like, I know that's just like a thing that I created. Like it's not me. So yeah, let's, please help me make it better. Like tell me what's wrong. What do you think is wrong with it? I think notes are my like love language. So give me notes, like tell me what you think I should do. Let's like make it better. That's how I feel. But I think it took me a while to like get there too, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So just to like tie it up, we've all
Yeah.
tied something up already. But I guess like as a creative yourself, what is just like one thing you would give advice or just one thing you want a younger like us audience who or aspiring writers, people who want to go into the creative field, who come from a multi background or have different identities. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I feel like it's a question that I still ask myself. I don't have like a definitive answer. I guess my biggest answer would just be like you have to be okay with being invisible and not like succeeding, if you choose to do this work, because the career side of it and the career of an artist and the work of an artist is very separate. So you just kind of have to like have a kind of a clear-eyed view on, if I'm going to be so honest, like, and just like be myself and say no to that part that is, a salon woman, a sex worker that I deem just like horrible. Like that's gonna like affect my career. And do I just like, swallow my pride and do it? And then like hopefully like that will lead me to a better like opportunity down the road. I think you're going to encounter those choices as a as a creative person in this world trying to do this as a profession. So the more you can just like have a compass as to like this is why I'm doing it, and even if you made the wrong choice in the moment, you can be like, okay, so we learned something through that and my compass is still there. Yeah. There's just not like a good like answer to that. You just have to figure it out like step by step. So I guess just like keep going. That's like the biggest like advice. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Was really interested in like your idea with like the ballet industry. Like, do you have any
Yeah.
good experience in the ballet world? Because I know like I grew up competitive dancing and like I grew up like doing ballet and like that was hard for me as like a Southeast Asian woman. So like now I'm just really curious like what is your experience and like your do you have any personal ties to that story?
Yeah. Um, I'm Uyghur, so dance is in my blood. Like came out of the womb dancing. So I've, taken dance lessons and I think that kind of joy and sparkle in me that's about dance was very much like dampened when I started taking like actual dance classes because it was very much like ballet based and then it was taught by non-Uyghur people and then I just felt like I was like made to speak a different language with my body and I kind of lost touch with that like very like innate way of speaking. Um, so I just like with the ballet, I do ballet now, but as like a choice, right? Because like I started doing ballet like later in life. I love ballet, and I appreciate it as like a specific language, right? But I still see, how the harms that, when you're saying like only this kind of language is like the most beautiful and like elegant and it's a foundation of all dance, which is just so like, wrong. Like that does to a person. Like I still see it in like my adult ballet classes in the faces of, people who have like, done dance all their lives and I'm not even touching on the body issues. This is just like the cultural aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's really hard and like I still see it in my like teachers who are like they're trying to like cultivate this is very specific like ballet is not like a high art, it's just like a very specific way of dance that originated in this specific like context and culture, right? And it is, I think, and it's beautiful and it's great, but it is only wrong when you try to like elevate it above everything else. And I don't think there's enough, resources and like emphasis on other forms of dance. And as like a person, like I actually took a year off because from like my studies because I was like, I want to like learn dance like properly. I want to like, go learn like Uyghur dance and it wasn't possible. If I wanted to like learn ballet, yeah, there are resources. But if I wanted to like learn that, like it was like I couldn't. And I think that just speaks to I don't know. Like I think this ballet has been elevated as like this like high art. I mean, this is the neo-colonial world that we're like living in. So yeah, so in the pilot, I was imagining a character that is in this world and actively like combating that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate that because I feel like that's a conversation like not many people want to have, and even like because like beyond like you said like the what? Oh, sorry, I just read the chat. That is so funny. But yeah, I feel like no one's having enough conversation about like how toxic it is. Because I know like for me, I grew up competitive dancing, and that's like a relationship I still haven't like fully healed within myself. Like I stopped once I went to college. So I think it's so inspiring to hear you like taking adult like ballet classes on your own terms. So I just thought like I really appreciate your words and I meant to.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other question?
Well, what's the answer to the chat?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What's the answer to the chat question?
Oh, yes, Timothy. Yeah, I think it's just, I think the real question here is that I think the whole thing reveals that we really do care so much about ballet, because like ask around in any room, you're gonna find someone who like has a deep relationship with ballet in some way or another, and I think we kind of like, as a society, we kind of just like don't think about that or like suppress that. Like our like relationship to dance is just so unnatural, I think, in modern society. But what it reveals is like we have like in most of us like this like urge and this like relationship to like movement language that we don't get to like express. And I think that's why people really reacted to his comments, because enough people like are like, you know, they had this like deep relationship to ballet that was like dormant in them. They're like, no, we love ballet. We love ballet. But yeah. But yeah, he shouldn't have said that. That's like
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys. You guys are amazing.
Hi, folks. How's everyone doing? How's everything? Before I play this video, I'd give you some context and some background behind it. Well, first, I'll kind of introduce myself and some background on it. My name is Ali Baluch. I'm a filmmaker based here in Los Angeles, California. I've been in the film industry since 14 years now. I've worked at intern at like Nickelodeon. I've worked as a writer's assistant at HBO. I've been at MTV for a very long time. RIP MTV. Actually, I'm working on a project right now with a bunch of Gen Zers that are in their early 20s who don't know what MTV is or what ridiculousness is, which is fine. I can't. I'm sure I can see everyone show a hand. Does everyone know what MTV is?
Yeah. I mean, I do, yeah.
Okay, you guys are cultured then. Y'all cultured. I don't need to explain anything to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent almost like 10 years at MTV. Now the whole network and channel's dead and gone. I was a producer at MTV, and yeah, and I spent a long time working in YouTube and digital media. And I've worked with NBA athletes, all-stars, James Harden, John Morant. And I got my start doing very, very slapstick, toilet humor YouTube pranks. And we built like an empire by, well, first of all, I should preface, this was like 10 years ago or so. They were all fake, all those pranks that you see on like YouTube and stuff. And when we would do that, we would upload these really ridiculous like yoga pants pranks or elevator pranks, and they were all staged. Everyone I would bring on was a hired actor. I'd give them a couple of notes and then be like, hey, we're gonna pop out and scare you, scream and jump and run. Because I always felt weird just bothering people out in the public. I'm like, that's just not cool. But anyways, with that, because we like cultivated it and worked on it and like doctored it, we were able, you know, we managed to get like our first couple of views that I would work on. It was on this channel called FouseyTube, and the first couple like videos we uploaded got like 500,000 views. Cool. Replicated, did it again. We got like 1 million views. Then we next video 5 million views. The next video 10 million, and this was all on YouTube. The next video we did was like 20 million views, and then we hit like 100,000 or 100 million views, and they were all like very childish, ridiculous YouTube videos. But in the process, we kind of understood the dynamics and the power of thumbnails and titles, and where audience retention is. And we start studying the analytics of YouTube, where we see where does the audience drop off on the graphs, where, okay, they dropped off at this point, let's, our next video, let's make tweaks and creative adjustments based on analytics. And yeah, and from when I got started with, it was just me and the guy on the talent on camera, on screen talent, FouseyTube, his channel. We started with 500,000 subscribers when I came on board, and at the end of like 2-3 years, we got 500,000 to 10 million subscribers. And then, you know, he had public meltdowns and, you know, YouTube fame, money, all that, you know, it gets to some people's heads. So he's doing much better now. But from there, I like pivoted into like more traditional media. I was like, you know, I went to film school to study film and not hide in bushes and film people while we prank them. So, but it was fun, definitely a learning experience, definitely, you know, open other doors and possibilities. So this video I'm about to play for everyone was during that time. I was making these very, again, toilet humor kind of videos that, it just doesn't like fulfill the soul, or that creative itch that you have. So I really wanted to, and also for me, because I know this is conversations a lot on diaspora background. And, at the time I was born and raised in Northern Virginia, and it's like a very, very dense Afghan American hub. And there's institutions that have been set up there since the late 80s, early 90s. There's a lot of organized community there. So I went from that, a very like connected community, of people who look like me, think like me, see or look like me, or speak like me, to Los Angeles, which is very, as much as I love LA, and it's very sprawled out. There is no community. There is no like Afghan dominate culture here. So, I did feel like this disconnect. And the more, I reflected about my art and my background and my, I started focusing on like Afghan storytelling. And I feel like, you bring anybody from any cultural background, they'll tell you like our culture is deeply rooted in storytelling. We have the best, everyone will say that. And I truly believe that myself, that, Afghans are very, very unique and like great storytellers. And it's an art form within a community. So at the time, I had family living in Afghanistan. My dad was on and off in Afghanistan. So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I'm going to come visit Afghanistan. I'm going to bring a camera. I want to document like 10 stories. I want to do 10 little like vignettes on just people in Afghanistan. I want to highlight Afghan storytelling. I want to highlight the art of storytelling. And it's a very tricky thing too. I'll talk about the logistics in a second. And yeah, so I'll just prep this video and then I'll kind of talk more about the series I did. And this is one of my like dad's friends. He's from this region of Afghanistan called Panjshir. It's a little bit north of Kabul. So this guy is Panjshiri. That's like his province. And he's lived in Afghanistan his whole life. A lot of folks during the Soviet invasion in the 80s, that's when it was like the mass exodus of Afghanistan. Over 1 million people fled Afghanistan from early 80s till the early 90s from the Soviet war. And this individual, my family was one of those that left, my parents. This guy stayed. Then there was the Afghan Civil War right after the fall of the Soviet Union. And once the Soviets left Afghanistan, there was a power vacuum, there's fights between warlords on who's going to take over Afghanistan. So a very, very violent, bloody civil war happened. And during that chaos and unrest, the Taliban came in the mid 90s, and they brought quote unquote order. And from that chaos, they were able to gain control of Afghanistan from 96 till the US invasion in 2002, 2001, 2002, where it was like full on. So this individual, his name is Inayat. He stayed there the whole time, never left. So the story starts off with him talking about that transitional period between the Taliban leaving and the US coming in. There was like a little gap of time where he was saying it was, and he started, like, the story starts mid-sentence of him saying that time was crazy. It was just looting and thievery and this and that. And he's my dad's friend, so my dad, on like off camera, jokingly, my dad's a troll as well, and he was like, "Oh yeah, during all this looting, what did you take?" And then he starts a story, and he was like, essentially like, "How dare you? I haven't taken a single." And then his story begins, and then we can chat afterwards. My dad's name is Hashim, so he calls my dad. My dad off camera says, during that looting, what did you take? And he was like, let me tell you, Hashim, it kind Kind is like it's sweet. The literal translation is like sweet. So he was like, my sweet Hashem, let me tell you. So
بگی بوده حال بوده ما دیدم من اعتبار به خدا که باشم اگر من دست مردم گرفته باشم برده باشم باور اما گوش نگیرم تیر کردیم یک قصه داستان دیگه ما برات میکنم بسیار جالب است بسیار جالب است مرا خود باستو نگوی که احمق است یک وقت صبح کس دیگه دانه سبزای چتلیست دانه سطل من صبح خستم گفتم من میرم برم ریاست عجب خوفه که دیدی نی وقت یک منزله بود در پشت سر زیبی چتلیارم من دختر خور من میدو تا ساعت نگرفتم آستان صبح کی وقت است بزار بیرو بار بشه و تا صبح حج میرفتن آجی ها دم بغل دیوال رفتم چتلیارم انداختم هم یک شیر دولچه را گرفتم که بیخ دیوال خالی کردم که همینه که خالی کردم چشمم در بیخ دیوال رفتیم که یک دستمال های گل سیب نیست یه تو گرد دم بغل دیوال افتیده وی گفتم این چی هست این صد خالی کردیم این صد پدرنانت هم اینجا مونده که باز این خالی کنم آستایی که دستم پیش کردم علی آقا همین دستمال گرفتم این دستمال تو پیچاندگی بود تو کردم که دبل والا چی هست صبح وقت از دیگه که همین کردم سعی کردم که بیادر $8,000 است $8,000 است 5 دانه هزاری کلدار اولا گفتم خدا جان صدقه چه یه گفتم یه میزی که می زدم سر از دست که خوشگل شدم صد خالی را گرفتم فرسون خانه بودم صد دیگه اونجا بود اون صد ماده یادم رفت آمدم در میدان خانه آمدم دیگه بازم گپم زیر زینه است گفتم بیا کنیم زیر زینه یک دفعه بالا نرو که مادر اولادا سیاستن دیگه همیشه ببین که چی هست خود زیر زینه دروازه که آواز کردن تر آمدم سر نماندم حساب کردن که $8,000 است که 5 دانه هزاری پاکستانی کلدار برو 500 به خدا خوار نداشتم 5 دانه سری اومنی 500 روپیه اومنی نداشتم گفتم برو خدا داده تا با چشم قرآن چه پیدا بگی چه زدم میخواستم کسونی بالا برم گفتم صد دیگه چی شد او والله گفتم این صد لاردو به صد ما این صد نماندم پس رفتم پشت از اون صد پیسه را جیب پیسه را زدیم در جیب پایین کردیم دیگه حالا از من اون بغل دیوال رفتم صد را چپه کردم پس خواستم که دور کنم بیایم اینجا که شما بره که باز ما اونجا از نزدیک نشان چشم مفتید که دمی بغل میتر صندوق میترمو یک 4 نفر استاد از ریش سفید یک نفر هم تو برده واره دراز افتیده وی گفتم یا چی میکنه که صد خالی دستم آمدم که یک ریش سفید افتیده در این زمین این زمیجش تر از تامیجش گریه کنه گریه میکنه مکتوم ایام دیگه از وکاستن موتم چرا گریان چی گپ است و دیگه گفت وای آکا گفت گپ دست تباش چرا 1 روپیه هم نداری پیسه از پیش از این گل میشده ما از هچ ما ماندیم پیسه 4-5 نفر ماندم اون بایدک پیسه گفتم او والله راستی ها این مردک زوف است او بیزده دی زوف است ما گفتم کالی پیسه چی رقم بود گفتم نمیتونه میگه 8,000 پیسه فرنگی بود و دیگه 5,000 هم بود او گوشایم بین کرد که نیست یک دستمال بود در کمر ازی این رفته مچم در بغل دیوال جا تشنام برفته دیوازی که تنباد خود آواز کنه گری دستمال آواز کرده دستمال خراب افتیده اونجا خیسته برو کردم او الله بسار مد کاش این زوف است آمدم بخونیم صد در خانه بود در زیر بالا نرفتیم پس آمدم گفتم او اکا تو بیاره زره او از اونجا آوردم در روی ازی زدم یک کمک بنام آمد باید چی با فکر آمد گفتم چرا چی گفت میگه باز مفته او خدایی چی رقم شدی خو یک رقمی را گفتم تو بخیر تو بیادر پیسه پیدا میشه تو بخیر خوی را آوردم دیگه آوردمش در ریاست حج اوقاف دروازه که در آمدم مدیریت اداریش بودی طرف دیگه در اداری یک کسی از داره مدیر اداری است این باره که دید از همون دانی ورسی که مرد به گفت انجینیر صاحب خیریت است ما تو باش بیادر که دمیا یکی زوف کرده بیادر اینی جدی ترکایی میگه پیسه گم شده دفتر از یاد در آمدیم پیرو بارک هم مثلا میگه پیسه سی گم شده او مرا گفت وا با قرآن انجینیر صاحب با قرآن دل رئیس دل کلگی بر ازی سوختن در بدر شده یا پیسه زیاد گم شده یا چندین دفعه آمدن یا بسیار وضعیت خراب است ترس گفتوان پیسه میگه نداریم این حالتشان است خود این دفتر که میرسیدیم واشنگتن بابا باز رفتیدم او والله چرا ما تو بابا بیادر تو بخمی نشانی پیسه تا که میگی همین که نشانی پیسه گفتم یک دفعه دیگه چشم مفتی دم مدیر یعنی مدیر فهمید کیا یک دفعه مرد تو میکنه ما گفتم مدیر صاحب میخواد چی میگی گفت هیچ گفتم تو چرا میکنی گفتم بخیر پیسه تا نشانی گفتم بیتار یاری این خیز برای گفت که بازو فهمید گفت که او انجینیر صاحب بیا خیلی که اگر تو پیسه رو یافتی که بابا برای پیش رئیس و برادر یک عکس تا چاپ کنی بیره بیادر بده بیا قلاده و بحث آمدیم بخیر بابا چی رقم از پیسه گفت ترا کنی گفتم مجرد یا واسه که پیسه رو زمین جمعی تسماله کشید ما دیگه همه تستا دستم کمی دستمال کمی کشیدم این بابا و نموشه بود یک دفعه کمی دستمال خرابو بس یک چیز سوا کرد نمیز اردو پای ری سفید او بلیاز خدا بخی که مرا گناهگار ساختی مرا غرق گناه ساختی بخی بلیاز خدا تو بخی کارا نکن نمی پایم خود انداختم پایم گرفتم واج کردم او بلیاز بخی که مرا کشتی بیر خب خیست گفتم حساب کردیم گفتم این پیسه داد که فیلم نمی پیسه سه والو ری سفید مرا ماچ میکنی ری سفید دیگه او بودی هم پاک سار تلخست چرا دادی؟ چرا دادی؟ گفت من گفتم بیادر اینه طرفه حالا میگه خانه تو کجا من خانه بچی میگه بیگه زیر من گفتم نی پیسه عجب تانه سرچ میریم خب گم در راپور در رئیسی تا که رئیس آمد ما وقت برآمد گفتش که حالا هم کلان میشه یاره گفتم بیا که خانه من نشانه داد آوردم میدیم بغل کسی نه گفتم میریم که خانه من سه نمیشه گفت خلاص با خانه را دیدیم گفت با چی کنم من گفتم برای من هیچ چیز نکن فقط در حج که رسیدی یک سواب کن برو سر با مال خدا تصور تا یک ساعت قدر شد تا خانه که آمدیم مادر کرشمه گفت که کجا رفتی توی قدر دیر کردی یک چتلی خاک اندازار انداختیم من گفتم هیچ خود نفشد دکاندار مرا گیر کرد در قصه من ماندم میشد که سر خود دادم به یا ندارم یک روز دو روز سه روز دکاندار رو کرش خبر شده بودن یکیش آمده در اون دختره که قصه کرده که پدرت نقا پیسه افته بود اولا مردکه را پس داد اوی گفت در گوش حفیظه رسیدنه مرا چه میگه از تو برای کودن دیگه در دنیا نگفت چرا؟ گوی پیسه رو یافتی رفتی پس برسودن او زنکه تو خو میگی همین پیسه پدن نالت خو بسیار پیسه هم بوده او وقت من گفتم خدا شاهد است کمیدش سفید ما دیدم که تاییش گریان کده بود اینمی 40 سال دیگه هم که برای من خدا نفس میداد اون پیسه رو من میخوردم همه اون ثانی از یاد من نمیرفت که زوف کده بود ما همین کار کردم هرچی که شد برو توکل با خدا در او حالتی که من 500 با خدا نداشتم نخوانیم من این کار کردم برای برو گفتم خدا مهربان است این حال ببینید خواهر که همه چیزهای دنیا را که من میگم یک امتحان است همه چیز زندگی تیر میشه خواهر همون را من میگرفتم هرچون بچم 10 سال شد یا 9 سال شد یا 8 سال شد کم شد زیاد شد حالا میخورد میشه نمیمانی اما همون صحنه ها همون ده ها همون چیزها همه میمون اگر من پس همون پدر نالت سطل یادم نمیرفت دوباره پس نمیرفتم پیسه از ما بود من دیگه کسی نمیداد دیگه خلاص اما ببینین اینمی هم خودش یک امتحان خداوند است ما چیم که مرا چی رقم یک امتحان کرد اول مرا خوب و شارک ساخت پیسه هم داده من گفت نه بچهش تو بسیار لودام هستی بیاکلام هستی پس از پیشت میگیره میشه 5 دقیقه در جیبت نمیمونه 5 دقیقه بعد من خرچاق رفتم پس دوباره پیسه مدرکه رو برش دادم الله اکبر بگی این رای راستش است میگه اما یک ضرب المثل پنجشیری هستک میگه گر نقل و کباب هم بخوری میگذرد ببینید چه خوب گفتن گر نقل و کباب هم بخوری میگذرد تر کرده با آب هم بخوری میگذرد اگر نان تا آب هم تیر کنی میگذرد اگر یک در پلو هم بزنی میگذرد همش هم میگذرد نمیمانه باقی هوا خاطرش میمانه یا
All right. I love that story. I've been watching it for 12 years now. I loved it when you told it in person, and every time I revisit it, it's still a favorite of mine. And it's a favorite because it truly highlights the art of oral storytelling within our culture. There is, as you saw, he's a very animated individual, and it's not a very unique thing. A lot of our elders or relatives, that's how we were raised on storytelling. We were raised on, and we don't ever look at these stories as 100% accurate. I'm 100% sure there's exaggerations left and right, but also like the beauty of it is the delivery of the story. You don't get caught up on the details. You get caught up on the performance and the theatrics of oral storytelling, and you could tell a story, but also like the performance of it also plays a very critical part on that, on how you capture the audience. And the audience in that was me, my mom, my dad, and like my cousin, maybe my sister, like 4 folks. We're not talking about an audience of millions in front of a screen or anything, but a very intimate audience. And so the whole concept, and this was a series, I tried to document 10 stories of, and I'm sure if you ask anyone about Afghanistan, there's always, everyone has insights on war and trauma and tragedy and loss and heartbreaking stories. And, and that is a sad reality of lives in Afghanistan. But I wanted to solely focus on the art of storytelling, oral storytelling, and just capture very whimsical stories, that the day-to-day stories that the locals in Kabul had experienced. And the objective was, there's a vast majority of Afghans who've never had the chance to go back to Afghanistan and visit their parents' motherland, their ancestral home, for various reasons. And there is a disconnect between the diaspora and in Afghanistan itself. And the only kind of bridge that we have to the country is through our parents. And depending on your parents' experience, every family obviously is different, but there's a lot of families that experience trauma on their way out of fleeing Afghanistan. And a lot of stories, there's that comedian Hassan Minhaj, and he did a one-man show a couple years ago called Homecoming King. And he talks about this essential idea that a lot of our immigrant parents are like treasure chests where they like secure these stories. And it's so hard to get them to talk about their past and talk about their experiences and talk about what they went through. My father was part of the Afghan resistance fighting against the Soviet occupation. And, I have tried for many years to really pull these stories out of him and get just to know his experience and know about it. But, and it's hard. He doesn't like talking about it. Every now in his much older age, he's in his 70s now. It seeps out as PTSD coming back, so, but a lot of our families don't talk about their times in Afghanistan or their experiences. So when I created this series, and there's about 10 videos very similar to the style, and I would upload them, and I wanted, my objective and my intention was for the Afghan diaspora to watch this, share it with their parents, and then that causes something where, their parents would be like, oh, you know what? I actually have a story similar to this. And then they would open up. And that was the intention going into it. And while I was filming it, while I was editing it, and while I was releasing it, that was always the intention. And then, this was, and I bring up all those like YouTube pranks that I was doing and the hundreds of millions of views we were getting, because at the same time that we were uploading these videos of us staging pranks at Venice Beach and yoga pants, that we would get like 50 million views. I was uploading this at the same time, and I was getting maybe like 1,000, 2,000 views, maybe 5,000, and it was very demoralizing. But I was like chasing the quantity, or I was chasing the quality of the viewership versus the number and the quantity. And the few hundreds of people that watched it and personally reached out, I was like, that's all I needed, you know, like that fulfilled this creative hole. I felt like a void that in me that I felt like I needed. Or was the validation of there's something I had an intention to create a project. We shot it, we did it, we uploaded it. Nobody saw it, but the few that did, it resonated with them. And that created a relationship, a bridge to Afghanistan for them, you know? And it's hard to create a bridge to a country that so many people aren't able to go back to frequently rather than ever, you know? Many of our families left in the 70s and 80s and have never gone back. So anyway, that was yeah, and it was very tricky to film it too because the first one I filmed, the first story I filmed, was about a local soccer player in the area, and that soccer player, you know, and then he told a story about the time during the Taliban when the Taliban came over. You know, the one thing that they allowed was soccer. You know, men could play sports, soccer. That was like the only thing. And his story was about how the Taliban came to him and was like, "We need you to be like our coach," you know. And he was like terrified. But when I filmed that one, he was the first person I filmed. You know, I brought in lights with me from LA, and I brought like a giant boom pole to like, you know, and I had like cameras right in his face. And the second I hit record, he went very formal, and it felt like a news interview. And I was like, no, I really need that like authentic. We're sitting over tea, and you're telling me this very intimate story. So I had to like in Afghanistan just figure out like how to like approach this. So what I would do is I would just stick a camera like far in like the deep corner of the room. And like initially when they would come in, we'd say hi, salam, this and that, and I'd place some like a lav mic on them. And then, you know, 45 minutes in, 30, an hour in, there's a camera tucked away in the corner, they're mic'd up, they forgot like, oh, I have a microphone on me, and then, you know, we just get in conversation, and then they'd be like, oh, let me tell you a fascinating story. And while he's doing that, I'm always like looking at the camera to see like, is he in frame? And in this story, you know, he stands up and he's demonstrating like what he did and etc. So I'm like the whole time I'm just not listening. I'm just like looking at the camera to make sure he's in frame, he's in focus. But it all worked out. But yeah, there are also little tidbits in that story that are very, very like unique to Afghan, because when he mentions that he saw a handkerchief and like, so essentially, you know, he went to dump out his waste, and Afghanistan doesn't have a great like composition and waste management. So it's like, oh, there's an open field, and this is not for the whole country. These are like, you know, different neighborhoods, situational. In his neighborhood, it turned out to be like, oh, there's an open plot of land. They're just going to dump our waste here, whatever. And so in the place of waste, and sometimes some men use it as a public bathroom. Again, it's not all of Afghanistan. It's a very situational neighborhood thing. Like, for example, I live in Los Angeles, Koreatown. There is trash and filth all over the city. But if you go down 20 minutes to like Beverly Hills or West Hollywood, you won't even see like litter, you know? So very situational. But anyways, in this neighborhood, a place in an empty lot of human feces and waste and trash, he saw this very like Afghans have these very like colorful, and I think it's all throughout Central Asia as well, colorful like scarves, handkerchiefs that you get like uniquely from shrines, like very like holy shrines throughout the city or the country. And you know, some believe that, you know, if you place the handkerchief on this shrine and pray for it, it's blessed. So for him, he was like, oh, this very like, what is this beautiful handkerchief that's mainly from shrines doing in this waste blank? And that's what kind of caught his eye and his attention to go to it. And yeah, so I wanted to talk about that and try to like, in my background of trying to bridge my background, my culture, and try to help other Afghans in the diaspora connect with the motherland through story and storytelling. And you know, like it, and I'm sure, you know, do they call you Professor Zora or Miss Saeed or Professor Saeed? But she, Is she?
Yeah, you could just say Zora. If they say Miss, I would
Nah,
I would tell them all.
never.
Okay. Uh, I'm yeah, I'm sure, Zora's spoken extensively about the long history of storytelling in Afghanistan, whether it's oral storytelling or even through our rugs. Afghans have this very, very unique way of storytelling on like very, very small printed rugs that they hand weave, and they'll have images. And it kind of really took off during the Soviet time invasion, where it would kind of be essentially like propaganda flyers essentially for the Afghans to be like, we have our resistance, and they would like hand weave like resistant fighters against the Soviet. I have one. Let me turn my camera off real. Just give me 2 seconds. I have a little rug that I want to show you.
Yeah.
I'm still here. Give me 1 second. These would be it's like tapestry, but I have a very, very miniature, small version of this, and this it's a map of Afghanistan, and it's a resistance fighter in the center with a sword cutting through the Soviet sickle, hammer and sickle, and then it's like all the countries are like written that border Afghanistan, and this is just like one example, and then over the last couple of years, it's turned into like the resistance fighting against U.S. occupation or against the Taliban or whatever it was. There would always be these images, and the bigger rugs have more stories to tell and symbols. And it's woven into the pottery, and it's woven into all of that. So even though many families, the diaspora, like the diaspora elders, look down upon the arts because it does run deeply within the culture. And I mean, they look down upon it because, a lot of immigrant families want safety and financial security for their children, and working in any form of art is not always a financial secure future. So that's why it's the cliche of doctor, lawyer, engineer, because they just want safety and security for us. So we don't go through what they went through, where they had to start their lives from scratch and from zero. But, it does run deep within the history of Central Asia and Afghanistan. But anyway, I've rambled for a very long time, and I hope I haven't taken up too much time. And I know there are questions that we could get to.
When the uncle was speaking in the video, I thought it was just super sweet because I could imagine like talking to my grandma that way, like the way she says her stories. I don't know. I feel like here it's like you don't get that connection anymore. I feel like when you meet with people, it's a lot more shallow. Like, hey, how are you doing? How's your day been? Things like that. But with them, it's like such deeper stories that we never get to hear. You'll hear it on a random Tuesday afternoon. It's like, where has this been my entire life? I didn't know with my parents, for example. My dad graduated from the best university in our country, and then he went on to become like one of the top physics professors. And I was like, I hate physics. Why didn't I know this before? Why didn't you help me with physics?
Right.
Really helpful like 10 years ago. Where were you? Okay, not 10, like 5 years. But yeah. And then, or like my parents falling in love at first sight, they act like it's a taboo topic. Like, hello.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Mention these things. I have to like hammer it out of them. Even then, they'll like they won't talk about it. It's so crazy. But yeah, it's nice when you get to hear these stories and actually connect with people of the older generation, because it's like if you don't hear from them, where would you hear from?
Right. And they hold a lot of these very intimate stories close to them, and like, yeah, my mom, up until I think I turned like 30, where I was talking to her about something, just trivial conversations, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, yeah, I got arrested once. I was like, oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, what? She was like, yeah, I was handing out like Mujahideen resistance, like flyers around like Kabul, and the Soviets locked me up. I'm like, I'm sorry, excuse me, what? You got arrested? How am I 30 years old and finding this out now? And it's stories like that, I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but it is very, but once the stories start, you want to be like a deer in head, like you don't want to move. You don't want to frighten, you're like, oh, you're opening up please continue. I don't want to cut you off. I don't want to, like this is a very rare moment. Let me just hear this out. And then it's packed in the book of lores, dad lore, mom lore, whatever, uncle lore. Um, and yeah, it's hard to access, but once they open up, we just want to kind of let them. And that's essentially what a lot of these little series like this video happen, that like once you got started, you just let them have their monologue. It's like them having their moment to shine and tell the story, and you don't want to interrupt because you don't want to like throw off the story or whatnot. So and he went for like 10 minutes straight, no interruptions, no cuts, no, just and yeah, so I definitely feel that, where it's like once you hear these stories, you're like, where are these stories been?
I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about the film that you showed us. I kind of wanted to
Right.
hear more about like your process, like and the people that you chose to like interview in a way. Were they just like random people that you met on the street, shopkeepers, close family, or relatives?
Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of kind of all of that. I My access was very limited, unfortunately. So I would always have to use like family relations, or like I would ask like, do you know someone that could get me, in touch with X, Y, and Z? So it started off with like folks within like my family circle, and then I would start reaching out. So and each person that I would kind of be presented, so I'd like call up a relative or my dad's friends or my aunt or someone, be like, do you know someone that's a good storyteller, that that could tell me blah blah blah, and they would give me a list of like, oh, this person, and I'd be like, oh, what do they do, and so I first kind of started with like a family friend who was working in, they're like, yeah, he was working in government, he was working under the president at the time, it was like one of his foreign ministers, and he had a very unique story. But it wasn't about his time in as a foreign minister; it was his time as a youth backpacking throughout Afghanistan. Where I'm like, oh, these are stories we never really hear. Like you backpack throughout Afghanistan. So he talked about, and each one kind of had a theme. One was about like the hospitality of traveling. One was about being tested, and which we saw. I spoke with this businesswoman who talked about how she started like an underground business in Afghanistan of like dressmaking, and they wrote a book on her called The Dressmaker of Khair Khanan. I met with a political prisoner and talked about his time of running a hunger strike in the prisons of Afghanistan during the 80s, and the soccer coach. And I interviewed my dad talking about his time as a resistance fighter, and I did one. So it was like 10 stories all, and one was about Afghanistan's like quote unquote first rock band. It's called Kabul Dreams. And then a filmmaker, a director, and his challenges of shooting a feature film in Kabul in the last like 20 years, post US invasion. And I think I ended it on the governor of Kabul. He was a like family friend relative, and he talked about, that was the only, everything was like very whimsical stories about like how we, one guy was like, the rock band was like, we played on the street corner for the first time with the guitars and bass and drum, and everyone's like, whoa, what's going on? And there's all these like very fascinating stories. And then the last story was the only one that really touched on like grief and loss, and then and that was, so yeah, the stories were just through personal relations and people I knew, because yeah, you could meet a shop owner right off the bat, you say hi, how's it going, blah blah blah, small talk, and then they would open up with some very like essentially trauma dump and tell you these very deep stories. But also like once you bring a camera into the equation, then everyone's like, yeah, I don't know, man, I don't want to be on camera. So I always had to like vet out to see who would be comfortable being recorded and being posted. So that was always like the trick, and the challenge of it.
I really enjoy that you shared like most of your stories, including the series. Is like I've never like ever like I've seen like many people share stories like that. I've seen a lot of them, but never in my life have have your parents and your father and other like locals who like want to share their stories. Um, besides that, have you well, since you're a filmmaker, have you like
Yeah.
ever do like experimental filmmaking that fits on like the Afghanistan diaspora? Because there's like a lot. I'm a media studies major, so I
Okay.
know some of the things
Right.
that I've seen and learned from like professors, all that stuff. Have you ever explored other like experimental media that you wanted to like to do within the Afghanistan diaspora?
Yeah. No, you know, I haven't had the chance. And not that I just, when it comes to experimental art and experimental film, um, I don't ever think I have the depth for that creatively to be able to explore that. So I haven't had the chance to do that. And this was as like experimental as I got because a lot of my work outside of because this was like a very passion project that I did. And a lot of my work is commercials. So whether it's like traditional media producing at MTV or I've done like commercials for like New Balance and all these other like basketball players I've done commercials for. So I haven't had the chance the opportunity to be able to do something more to revisit projects about Afghanistan. I did, actually, I did some music videos. I think I did. There's this like there's an Afghan rabab player, and rabab is like it's like those Indian sitars, those like bigger like guitars, but it's like an Afghan rabab is like a very smaller one, and it's kind of like similar to the styles of other instruments of that region. And we tried like it's very instrumental, so I would do like these like music videos with this ball player, and I try to get it. That was the furthest I got with like doing experimental art about Afghan, and it's this player that his name is Kais Isar, and he's this like Afghan hippie dude from Arizona, and he grew up playing like in rock bands, and he played the electric guitar, and somewhere in his life he just made a switch into like Afghan music, and he brought a lot of the energy that he had from his history and background playing like rock music and electric guitar into playing the rabab. So a traditional instrument that you play very composed. He adds headbang, and he has long hair too, and he adds like headbanging and a lot of fusion music into it. So with that, and it also like talks to bringing in Afghan music, historical and folk music, and adding like drums and adding synths to it. And we've collaborated a few times in the past, and that's also a fusion of like being Afghan and being American and bringing in different sounds. So I feel like that might have been one of the few times I got to really be experimental because I'm like, how do I make a video for an instrumental Afghan track with no vocals and so I shot one like it was a rock video. I had fast cuts and flashing lights and used a lot of Linkin Park as inspiration for that.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
I'm a Kurdish woman and I direct film festival.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you. So I very much was impressed with capturing that moment of oral historian. You're unpacking and giving him space, and he's telling this moral story. I mean, it's like so much to unpack here. I'm not going to get into details. I just loved how he says, this is who we are as Afghani people. We are good people. We are honest, and there's. I'm pretty sure he added so much to it to make it rich, but it's just beautiful and very informative that, if you have an idea geographically, you can locate space people, relationships, Hajj, and it's like so much information. I learned so much. My question to you is this, because we as Kurds have that dilemma as well, as our land has been still under occupation, and the stories are very sad. Those who migrated here do not want to share their stories with the, I think, lucky ones, right? Reaching out to the audience is very difficult because Kurdish films are so dramatic, so sad, and depicting all this poverty striking places, and you always have to die, fight. It's like we have a lot of fighters.
Of course.
What do you do? What do you do to make your story being received by Afghan people in diaspora? I'm pretty sure they will, they would welcome that, modern way of seeing themselves on a silver screen back home. But what do you do to make it attractive without touching the authenticity of the story to kind of, give it to those who are in diaspora? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, because that's a question that I myself have grappled with for so long, and I've struggled with that. How do I try to create any type of art or or content and not go too sensational with it, because you can easily make anything sensational for the sake of it, just for the clicks and the views and the audience. And also you're sacrificing so much of like your artistic integrity for like doing that. And yeah, it's been a question that I've been asking myself. So how do I build this audience, or present audience content to an Afghan audience, or how do I create this content for an Afghan audience without being too sensational, without leaning into as they call it, trauma porn, because I know that could do well. I know it would resonate. I know if I talk about death and grief and struggle, it will hit an emotional chord in which, it could get more viewership, and it could get more audience, and it could get more eyes on the content. But also, those aren't stories that, I mean, they're important to tell, but I feel like so many people have leaned so heavily into that at this point it's to be expected. Like if you're going to hear a story about an Afghan or of Afghanistan, you're expecting before it even begins that this is going to be a story of tragedy and hardship and overcoming and loss, and it's just you're going to be miserable from beginning to end of it. It's that, or it's a military story. So it's like one or the other. Like, which one do you go with? So I've and I touched on it earlier, but it's something for me. The way I've approached it was I'll always go for quality over the quantity. So even if we make a film or a project that 20 people will see and it resonates with those 20 people deeply, I'll take that over like 100,000 people viewing something that just goes through them, that doesn't resonate, that doesn't stick with them, So I think to answer that question is like, I'll always try to create something that has, to me, as I call it, replay value, something where you can watch it again and again, where, there's so many movies out there where people will say, myself included, will be like, oh, that was a great movie, but I'll only watch it once. I can, like, movies like, like great forms of art, but it's just, it takes so much from you that you never want to revisit it. There are movies like Requiem for a Dream. There are so many other films where it's like a gut punch throughout the whole film, and you're like, oh, it was a good film, but I never want to revisit that, and I want to avoid that with anything I do. So that's especially related to Afghanistan. So if I try to create anything about my Afghan identity or Afghanistan. I want to avoid that feeling of ickiness where you're like, oh, it was good, but also like I don't want to see that again. Like I don't like how it made me feel. But it's also good that it made me feel something, but also I don't want to feel that again. So that's one thing I've personally been like grappling with and trying to like navigate, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So, but thank you for that question. Yeah, that's something that's always been top of mind for me.
So I wanted to say everyone adores you, so I can't imagine 20 people watching your film. You're so humble about this. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
You guys see? Y'all.
Thank you for attending our symposium. We've explored how media, storytelling, and cultural preservation are deeply tied to identity and power. We've discussed the struggle to represent Central Asian communities authentically while resisting stereotypes that often reduce Afghan and Uyghur people to narratives of violence, poverty, or oppression. Through film, archives, and storytelling, they emphasize the importance of preserving memories, culture, and everyday experiences before they are lost. The discussions also reshaped ideas of representation by showing that visibility alone is not enough, and that people must also have control over how their stories are told. These presentations connected to our course concepts surrounding media representation, diaspora, memory, and identity, demonstrating how media can both reinforce dominant narratives and create space for resistance and self-definition.